a good following. He's done, what, 3 other programs for us
At
anyway?
least 4, I think, yeah.
And one I know of for the Maine Mayflower Society, too.
Yep.
I want to take a minute. Curtis Ingram is here tonight. He's recovering from a week ago of open heart surgery, so he's healed very well, obviously. If you're interested in the scavenger hunt, I have applications up there. If you don't know about it, we could talk about it. They do really wild and crazy things on that scavenger hunt. Also, if you're past due with your membership or want to become a member, the dues are $20 a year. I've got applications for that too. Just as a reminder, we've secured a table for the June election day. If you're interested in helping out with that, that's kind of fun. You get to meet and greet people. And that all being said, it is my great pleasure to introduce Ron Romano. And the little write-up that we did. Maine cemeteries are rich with beautifully hand-carved gravestones created by local stonecutters dating from colonial times to the end of the 1800s. What do the gravestone symbols mean? What does the rising sun, the skulls and crossbones, the pointing fingers, the little angels, the lambs and so forth, what do they mean? He'll tell us. So please give a rousing round of applause for Ron Romano.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's make sure everybody can hear me okay. They put overhead, you should be getting the, can you hear me okay? Can anybody not? Good, great, okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me back. This is, I think, my 5th time before this group, and I'm running out of topics. I've talked to you about so many different things. Actually, I'm kidding. I can always talk about cemeteries and gravestones, so invite me back anytime for more if you'd like. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on the meaning of the symbols that we find as we take strolls through our historic cemeteries. So that's really the focus. But, now let's see if I can get this to go. Oh, no. Oh, there we go. So we're going to start with a little bit of context, though. On the left-hand side, we'll talk about burial spaces and burial places, what I call the anatomy of a gravestone, so you know what you're sort of looking at when you confront one, grave marker materials, and then the key part of the program, of course, is the symbols and the meanings. We will have time for questions at the end, of course. The goals here are, if you already like to take cemetery strolls, you're going to better understand what you're seeing when you're out there. If you don't, get out there and start strolling around. There's a lot to see. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. Yep, wrong way. Okay, so burial places. There are more than 7,000 cemeteries known to have existed in Maine. So you drive around, you see a few here and there, but 7,000 or more is a pretty big number. The largest footprint is in Bangor at Mount Hope, over 300 acres at that site. The most subterranean residents, I like to call them, are at Portland's Evergreen Cemetery at 65,000 or more. And the oldest that we think, and this is of course a European settlement, not native people settlements, is probably Eliot's early settlers in 1647. There may be some that are earlier than that. So what kinds of burial places are there? Because Maine was a rural, and it still is in some cases, a rural area, family lots was the way people buried. Farmers just set aside a patch of their own land to bury their dead right on their own property. They often would surround them with a fence or a stone wall, as you see here. That sort of went away by around 1900, but really was the most common type of burial in Maine for many, many years. Graveyards or churchyards is a special word. When people say, I'm going to the graveyard, for somebody like me who studies these places, I think it's attached to a church, because the word itself, graveyard, churchyard, that's the original meaning, is that it was associated with a church. It was the yard at the church. Today, of course, everybody calls everything cemeteries and graveyards, and that's okay. We forgive you for that. But just know that in the past, there was a special meaning for a graveyard and a churchyard. That was a tradition brought over from England. Over there, of course, in the larger cathedrals, people were buried under the floor inside. That really didn't happen over here. People were all buried outside. But you see a couple examples of churchyards and graveyards here. The one on the right is actually in Yarmouth, not too far from here. If you weren't associated with a church, you had a town burying ground. This is a picture from 1775 of Portland showing the burying ground at the time. That street that goes across up top is Congress Street today, so it shows you how things have changed. That was India Street. It's India Street now. There was a swamp. Of course, this waterfront down here. It's all completely developed now and actually expanded to take the spot above that patch. So the original burying ground was here. It's now about double that size above it. So town burying grounds were truly public places. Colonial families took care of all aspects of death and burial, dressing the body, washing the body, finding a box for the body, going to the local common burying ground, digging the hole where they could find room, and putting the box underground, and then marking it how they chose. So graves in these sites can be found pretty haphazard sometimes because people just look for an open space and then dig a hole. Some towns, however, were a little more organized, and they had rows that were set up and established to keep things a little bit more orderly. Around the 1830s, we saw the rise of what we call the rural or the garden cemetery, another concept that came over from London. Over there, everybody was buried in a churchyard for centuries. These churchyards were so full of bodies that sometimes they had to pile dirt 10, 12 feet above the height of the church because they had so many bodies stacked up. You can imagine with the amount of communicable diseases and things that brought tons of death at the same time, they couldn't keep up. And so they were literally bodies that were decomposing in plain view. It was a horrible place to live. They needed to do something about it, and what they decided was to go outside the city and build large expanses that could be used both as a burying place and as a garden type setting. So people would come visit it as a park. That's exactly what happened. That concept really caught on. It came over here to the States as well. And what we have here are these park-like settings which have water features in them, native plantings, the manicured grounds, and the natural landscape was preserved when they did that. If you look at this map, this is of Greenwood Cemetery in Biddeford, which is one of our local garden cemeteries. And you can see there's no real straight lines and square patches here. This was specifically designed with these curvy linear paths so that people could buy these interesting shaped lots and then bury. People were encouraged to put beautiful grand monuments up, and that's where you find these obelisks and all these big family markers in these types of settings. Here's a picture of Greenwood, which you just saw the map of, showing you one of the round lots and how the family decorated it. A large central pedestal monument, and then the bodies are all buried in a spoke-like fashion around the center, so the individual markers are sort of all in a circle as opposed to in a nice, neat line. Mount Hope in Bangor is considered to be America's second garden cemetery, so it was established around the 1835 timeframe. But Evergreen in Portland, Laurel Hill and Saco, Greenwood and Biddeford are all garden cemeteries as well. And then towards the end of the 1800s, things developed in a new direction in some places as well to what we call the landscaped lawn cemetery. Order was preserved here because they decided to just have flatness. A few monuments here and there, a few trees here and there, strategically placed, but the stones would all be in ground, not up tall or vertical. And what that meant was it looked like a lawn, and that's exactly what it is, a landscape lawn, much easier to take care of, as you can see, but we find very few examples of symbolism there, obviously, because we're dealing with these just flat, metal markers on the ground. So limited in symbolism, but we are going to see a symbol from a landscape lawn in the program. So other places of burial include a crypt, which is an underground room like in a church. You can see upper left is a crypt. We don't really see that in Maine. There may be some, but not common here at all. It's more of a European thing in some of the bigger New England cities. Just below that is a mausoleum. That's an above-ground structure where coffins are held, usually for a family, sometimes larger for more than one family. Just below that is a family tomb built into a hillside. You can see the entrance door on the bottom. That's in a private family ground. Sometimes you find those in public cemeteries as well. And on the right here is the most modern type of burial, the columbarium, which is, of course, for cremains. So people are far more today being cremated than buried, and so this is allowing us to put a lot of urns in that space. Easily confused with a mailbox, as you can see. I'm not a real fan of columbarium, but I accept the fact that that's the way more people prefer to be buried. Okay, so the anatomy of a gravestone, what we're going to focus on tonight is the tympanum, which is the top of the gravestone. That's where the decoration is. So you see one here. It's got a beautiful urn with a bunting on it. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Just below that is the inscription panel. On the inscription panel, you always have the name, date, age, relationship information, and then sometimes, but not always, in smaller lettering, often italics, is the epitaph, and that's a rhyming verse, a religious verse, different variety. A lot of people didn't have epitaphs put on their stones, but almost everybody always has the inscription. But we're going to look at symbols today, so we'll focus on that. As you wander around, you may find some stones that have a footstone accompanying them. On the left, you see two headstones. The inscriptions are facing away from us. In front of them are the matching footstones, and those have just the initials which match the names on the front. So these were in favor from the 1700s through about the middle 1800s, and then people were like, one stone is fine. The burial practice of the time was the body would be buried with the head up to the headstone and the feet to the footstone. The inscription's always on the outside. Now today, if you think about it, when you have a family member buried, the stone is facing the body. So the body is laid down and you're reading the stone. So that's changed. Up in the upper right here, just shows you that in our earlier history, footstones were the most common thing that happened. It was part of the deal. This is a receipt from Bartlett Adams, our first stonecutter in Portland, in the Portland area, from 1800 to 1828. My first book over there is about him. Some of you I know of him, and you've got some Bartlett Adams stones here in Cumberland as well. But anyway, this is a receipt for a pair of gravestones, and when it says a pair, it doesn't mean they had two different headstones. It means they got a head and a footstone for that person, to the tune of $10.45, a good deal back in 1822. So grave marker forms on the left, the two are called just tablets. They're standard tablet markers. These are both slate. The red star means it's in Cumberland. So some of these pictures are from Cumberland. I've stuck a red star so you'll know. The middle one is a bedstead. It's also a slate marker, but imported from Boston. This is not a design or a shape that we produced here in Maine. It was up until 1800 when Bartlett Adams arrived and changed it all. But prior to that, throughout the 1700s up to 1800, you see a lot of those in our area that were imported from the Boston shops. At Eastern Cemetery in Portland, we have 125 of these that were all imported from Boston before Bartlett Adams showed up and started making stones. Here we have a pedestal monument. It looks like a pedestal, that's why they call it that. Larger, it's a big square contraption. On the left above is a box tomb. The bodies are below ground, not in the box. So this is a monument that's set on top of the grave. Below that is a table monument. Notice that the ledger slab is held up by those columns. And that's why it looks like a table, so they call that a table monument. The ledger slab will have all the information on it, as it does on the box tomb above. Obelisks over here on the right. Notice the verticality here. That's really, they love to do that during the rise of the garden cemetery movement. Lots of big monuments, lots of these huge things pointing to the sky. A standard obelisk is here on the right, and next to it, the next one over and a couple over, you can see the obelisk is broken by other pieces there. That's called a truncated obelisk, so they just had different forms of that particular monument. Okay, warning, shameless self-promotion. These are The next couple slides are about billboard monuments, which you have 3 of right up the street on the corner at the Congregational Cemetery. Wait, Congregational? Yeah, that's the one, yeah, right. So billboard monuments are these large, large slabs that were laid horizontally, but they were elevated on posts. Some of them metal posts, some of them on stone posts. This is a monument form that has not been studied or had not been studied until I took that on in around 2015. And I started because I found the 3 in your town. And I just put them in the back of my mind thinking, this is a really cool shape and different type of form. But I was busy doing other stuff, so I didn't deal with it. But later on, I started finding more of them, and all of a sudden, it became an obsession, but also a real point of research. And it ended up that I've written 2 books about this monuments form, and I now have people from all over the country contacting me saying, I think I have a billboard. So it's become, you know, what we call them, and it was because I made that up because I couldn't think of a better way to describe it. But anyway, that's what it is, long, narrow slabs. These weigh up to 500 pounds, elevated up. This one is for James Prince, 2 wives and 3 kids, and it has beautiful decoration of the flowers in that one. And there are only 42 in Maine, only made between the 1830s and the 1880s, and then they went out of style. So it's a very limited production. There's only about 90 known in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Mass, a couple in Quebec, a couple in Pennsylvania, a couple in Ohio, but that's really it for this type of style. The other 2 right here in town are the 4 wives of Reuben Sawyer. It's really cool. The one on the upper left, it's the first panel on that slab reads Reuben Sawyer, and then it says his wife, his wife, his wife, his wife, because the 4 in a row. And then 2 of the kids, each time he remarried, he married a younger woman. Still didn't do any good. They all predeceased him and ended up on this panel. That's a marble one on granite posts. Here we have a slate one on granite posts. This is for the Blanchard family, which I know is a big name here. Notice on the Blanchard one, again, you can see it in person right up the street, the empty panel on the left. That was intended for other members of the family who ended up dying and getting buried somewhere, and they got their own stones. But when this was created in the 1840s, a couple of the kids had died, and the family was reserving space on that for more, and it never came to fruition. Anyway, onward. So here's the map in Maine of the billboard monuments. You can see the 3 in Cumberland in yellow. All the ones that are orange are the other ones that I've documented that appear with the Cumberland ones in the first book, Billboard Monuments of Maine. So if you're interested in reading more about it, I got those today. The ones that are in purple are in the second volume, Curious Gravestones, and that also expands out to New Hampshire and Vermont. So really cool type of monument that keeps me jazzed. Okay, grave marker materials. On the left, wood. Since we didn't have a stonecutter in our area till 1800, and lots of people lived here and died here in the 1700s, when they were buried, families would use a chunk of wood or a piece of found stone or field stone, usually uninscribed, which is what you have up there. You have head and foot stones uninscribed. Occasionally, somebody would take a stab at carving onto a field stone, as they did in this one. It's from 1720. What makes this really charming is it's Jonathan Wilson, and all 3 ends are backwards. So it was the guy who didn't really know his lettering, but it's really cool. That's at Eastern Cemetery in Portland. So slate was the most popular stone through the colonial period into the federal period. So 1700s to the mid-1800s. Here's a perfectly beautiful slate marker carved in Boston. Looks like it could have been done recently, but look at the date, 1773. It lasts for a long, long time because it's a harder stone. The next most predominant is marble, white marble, which arose around 1800 and then really took over from slate around 1840 or so and became the monument of choice, or the material of choice, until the machine age at the end of the century, and then granite is now what we use throughout the 1900s and currently. Granite is a much harder stone. Stonecutters couldn't hand carve it, so they always used slate and marble. But once the machine age arose, put them out of business. So these are examples of marble. You can see that it's so soft they could do 3-dimensional designs and make beautiful, beautiful stones out of this white marble. Granite is the most common today, from around 1875 to today. Here are some examples of standard ones over on the left, the Haley stone. You see zillions of those all over the place. And then sometimes they got a little bit more interesting with some nice designs on them. But that's what you find today still is granite. Sorry for my voice, it's a little bit hoarse. If I start whinnying, that's when you need to worry. Get it, hoarse? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what we're here for, symbols and meanings. So the symbols on grave markers are truly folk art because they were hand carved by, for the most part, professionals at the time, artisans at the time. They reflect the individual style of the cutter. You'll see the same design by the same cutter over and over again sometime with little differences. Could reflect preferences of the family of the community. These designs can reveal the deceased's profession, religion, affiliations, even the cause of death. We're going to see examples of all those as we go through the slides. And can contain indicators of an untimely or premature death, as well as the length of a person's life. So that'll all make sense momentarily. We're going to go through 24 examples in all. And I'll go pretty quickly because there's just 2 or 3 slides per each one, and just talk through them. So hourglasses is the first one. Hourglasses are reminders to those who pass by of the brevity of life. There's a beautiful stone on the left here of a winged face or a death's head, but notice at the very bottom center is a hourglass. Up here on the top is one with wings. That's where the phrase "time flies" comes from. So that's what that is. Most often we see that one there. Here in Maine, we have a few of these. This one is up in Poland. Poland, I think, or Poland. I'm going to say Poland area. Notice that this is a large, the whole top of the stone has this design of the hourglass. You can see the sand on the bottom. It's run. The epitaph, this was carved by Bartlett Adams himself, our local guy, and the epitaph on the bottom of the stone for this young woman, 31, who died of consumption. Death poised his dart, the deed is done, her life is spent, her glass is run. And that's reflecting the hourglass, which is now emptied. The second example is coffins. So this is a Massachusetts marker, not a Maine marker, but it's one of the more extraordinary ones because it's memorializing a mother and her infant child, and the two of them you can see are in the viewing area of the casket or the coffin, and then that's the full stone there, which shows you the way it looks as you would walk up to it. Really interesting, and there's a fair number of those in Massachusetts. Here in Maine, these two exist. The one over on the left is from Kennebunkport. Notice that it is a coffin. There's a skull and crossbones on it, and then there's a willow tree to the left, and then there's an hourglass again on the right. So a mix of symbols on that one. This is the one that's in Poland. I got to think of where that other one is from, but anyway, it's up near Poland. This is the stone that's in Poland. This coffin has the G, which is for geometry, sometimes for God. It's not the family name. This was a mason. There's masonry symbols on here as well, and then a weeping willow tree. But the main symbol on this is, of course, the coffin with G. So bones, we've seen a couple examples already. These are a reminder of the certainty of death. Remember that in the 1700s especially, up to the 1800s, there were a lot of people who lived in our area who were illiterate, and they did, especially when they lived in the city, what they needed to be able to see a sign to know what a shop was or what things meant. They couldn't read the words. So the symbols that we see on grave markers were part of that whole idea. They'd walk down the street and see a pig and they'd know it was a pork shop, and they'd see a loaf of bread and they know it was a bread shop. You go into the cemetery, you know you're looking at a bunch of dead people below ground because that's the reminder of the finality of death here. So these are imports from Boston, stark, but really interesting to find. Those are both from Eastern Cemetery in Portland. Also at Eastern Cemetery, this photograph is about 40 years old on the left, and it is a full skeleton. Sometimes people call him or it the Grim Reaper or Father Time, but he's got the scythe which cuts life short, holding an hourglass, and he's standing while Mr. John Robinson is sitting in the chair sort of paying attention to the whole scene, and the Father Time is basically letting him know, your time is up, buddy. You're on the way out. So it's a very, very interesting and rare example of a full skeleton. Here's what it looks like today. So unfortunately, a victim of vandals that came in and smashed a bunch of stones and stole pieces of them. All we have left is just this side. We're missing the skeleton. It's really kind of sad, but thankfully we had a photograph of it that helps us see what it looked like originally. So winged skulls are also known as death's heads, a little less final than what we just saw, because now we have wings, which represent the resurrection to heaven. So the skull is representing death, the wings lift the soul to heaven. So that pairing is an evolution from just the, the basic bones and skulls to a new idea. But look at the skull as quite vacant, the big round eyes, that's a classic look. There's a ton of those around. A little bit creepy. This one looks almost like a light bulb more than a skull, but just the carver's interpretation of a skull with wings. Here's another one. This one also at Eastern Cemetery in Portland. And this one, that image may look familiar to some. It's the logo from PBS Mystery, Masterpiece Mystery. They used that exact symbol. This was a Boston carver this was his signature look. And in Boston, they found that in the cemetery and used that as their logo, but we have one in Portland. Great look. So we evolved from bones to winged skulls, now to winged faces, so we're getting a little bit more human as we go. So less severe, more human. These aren't angels, so you're seeing a human face with wings, but it's not an angel. This is a winged face, and that's what we call it. But the symbolism here is the same as the last example. The face represents the soul, the wings are the resurrection. So this is a pairing that was popular for about 40 or 50 years. Each carver had their own sort of look that they did. So when we find this same looking person, we know it's the same carver, also from the lettering. But you can see they all had different, look, this guy's photobombing this one. And then that one's kind of a different look. This pair shows you, it's for a wife on the left and a husband on the right. It's the exact same look. It shows you that these were not intended to be likenesses of the individual. So these are human faces, but they're not likenesses of the individual. Oops. Okay. Or maybe they are. Okay, so here are a couple more. These are both Maine as well, Damerscotta, and I forget where this one is. These are faces, but that one has arms coming out of the face as well as wings. Heralds of the resurrection. You can see they both are blowing the horn. That one says on the banner, "Know ye the hour." It's kind of a cool look, but that's pretty rare. More often you just see the winged face on as opposed to side like this. Sometimes we find these really creepy ones that really don't look like a skull or human. We call those soul effigies. That's really what they are. And they take all different forms. But this one just has sort of the wild hair, the big vacant eyes. There's no mouth. Down below, it almost looks like spider legs as opposed to wings. But that's what it is meant to be. But yeah, these are soul effigies, a separate category from the winged faces and winged skulls. Angels have their own category as well. These are guides to heaven. You can see on this panel here, there's an angel in full flight. Notice she's carrying a young naked infant with her, escorting that baby up to heaven. But angels take other forms as well. Here we have an angel visiting a woman on her deathbed. You can see the woman lying on her bed here at the bottom. You can see the angel standing there, her two wings on either side, and notice her fingers pointing up, letting the woman know that's where she's headed next. These two are angels making a judgment, reading Mr. Cook's Book of Life. One's pointing to a page, and others just sort of standing there holding the book up. You can see on either end they've got their wings there. So they're making judgment about his entrance to heaven. This one is at Laurel Hill Cemetery in Saco on my tour. Celestial bodies, suns and moons, really it's about the afterlife in heaven. It was an unknown back then, not like we know the universe today, so it was really this mystical thing. They did personify them sometimes, as you can see. The one on the left there is a rising sun, resurrection again, often personified. You can see the eyes and the eyebrows on this one peeping up over the edge. That's a Bartlett Adams marker. He did about 50 of those in his career, and they're spread all around. Great look. Although we also can find these sunbursts or sunrises which don't have the personification, just the plain suns here. This is in Saco, this pair. And that's marble, not slate. So the next category is what we call portraits. These are meant to be images of a human being. So we're not talking about soul effigies and that anymore. It's meant to be a real human. The one on the left was carved by Bartlett Adams, one of his early stones he did when he got here in Portland in 1800. It's for a woman who died in 1785, so he had backdated the stone for the family when he arrived. That really is a little bit too cartoony to be her. It probably is not the way she really looked. But that was one of his, what we call portrait stones, because it is, in fact, a human being. You can see shoulders, she's wearing a dress, and the whole thing. On the right, though, I would say that's probably him. So the one on the left is around 1800. The one on the right is around 1860, 1870. And by then, photography was in use. Stonecutters could get a picture of the person and then make the carving to look like them. And it just looks like a real guy. That doesn't look like a real woman to me. So that's probably him, a young man who died. This is an earlier one in sandstone of a husband and wife. I'm not going to make a guess if they look like that. I mean, I had no idea. But you can see she's got the necklace and the dress, and you can tell by the clothing which ones. Otherwise, it's a little hard to tell them apart. Maybe they were twins. So later on, of course, then real photography is used on grave markers. Here's some great examples where people embedded photographs right into the stones. And you'll find some of them still today. Some of the interesting examples here from different ages, but mostly latter part of the 1800s, and then into the 1900s as well. Now, for some reason, some people thought it would be cool to put a post-mortem photograph of their loved one on the marker. And so there's a couple examples of a man and a woman there. I'm not a big fan of that, but there's a lot of them out there, so some people felt that was what they wanted to do. On the right-hand side, a stone right here in Cumberland is what you sometimes see as you're wandering around, which is this stone with a incised little square or a rectangle, and you wonder, what's that? That's a photo pocket. So there used to be a photo in that stone. It's been stolen or was lost or removed by the family. Something happened to it. But you'll see those once in a while, and just if you do, especially when you wander around up here, know that there used to be a photo, maybe a tin type. This is 1861. What's that?
It was a tin type.
Oh, so you know there was one there?
Yeah.
Do you know what happened to it?
I don't.
Is it in your personal collection? Okay, don't let it leave this room. Yeah, but that's what it was. There would have been a tin type of something in there. This is a very modern portrait. This is a stone. I got a picture of this when I was down at a gravestone conference in Alabama a few years ago, and we toured a bunch of African-American cemeteries. And I absolutely just loved this one. The blue river was really quite bright blue. It doesn't show so well here on a black background. And then this is actually Benny Mobley's image. That's actually him, sort of just, the river is going heavenward. It's just, off to the distance. Really beautiful stone, one of my favorite stones of the modern period. Okay, the next category, mourning figures. These are, you can see, obviously, these are, in this example, two young women. They both are in a mourning pose, leaning on a box tomb, leaning on a large urn. Look closely, they both are carrying a handkerchief, so that's also a signal that they are in mourning. These two were carved by a man named Alpheus Carey in 1806. He was working in Bartlett Adams' Portland shop then. These two stones are in Topsom, Maine, at the same cemetery, so there's a pair that were done up there for a family up there. Three more examples of mourning figures on a broken pedestal, on a pedestal monument, and then over against an obelisk, it looks like, but always that pose of leaning over. And that same image isn't restricted to grave markers. It shows up all over the place. So it's on cemetery fencing up on the upper left, in a gravestone advertisement for a stonecutter locally. watercolors, tapestries, and even in more modern statuary in a cemetery monument that has lasted for, well over 100 years, is used, a couple hundred years. Okay, sleeping figures represent eternal slumber, always on a children's grave. You don't find a sleeping adult figure, I don't want to say ever. Occasionally you do on a huge, huge monument or memorial, but for these regular tablet-sized stones, it's going to be the children. Almost always carved on the top of the stone as well, and therefore subject to erosion, because marble is a very soft stone and erodes quite a bit. So they get hard to see. The one on the left especially, it's kind of almost looks like an alien figure because the features are gone because they've eroded away. But wonderfully, on the right, Flora Levitt, she was only 2 months old when she died, but her stone was created by father and son, the Johnsons and Saco, and they cut into the stone, and that's protected it from the weather. So the figure really is better seen in that example than in the ones where they're fully exposed. So yeah, these are really children's grave markers, all young, 11 months, 2 months. Oh, yeah, so the Johnstons, Freedom and Hiram, father and son, and then a third generation cut in Saco. Just so you know what a stone shop looked like, that's in Limerick. That was their stone shop in Limerick around 1905, I think, that was done. And if you look at Google Maps or you drive there today, that gazebo is still there, the church is still there, the house is still there, everything's still there. The building's been replaced, but that's where the stone shop was. You can see he's got all the stones lined up. Kind of a nice old photo. Hands and fingers. So tons of these. You're going to find them in any cemetery that's got a lot of mid-1800s markers in it. It's very common. Eternal bond between family members is the clasped hands. So that's typically what that means. Father and mother, so it's the family had these put for the father and mother, but not always husband and wife. Twin brothers in this case, as you can see. This one's at Evergreen in Portland. Sometimes that shaking hand or clasping hand is a farewell to the earthly existence for the first spouse by the second spouse. So in this case, the husband is saying goodbye to his wife who's predeceased him and holding her hand here. Then, when they both died, the family puts up under his grave, reunited. So the two are again holding hands as a couple again. So this one is, look at the one on the left. Have you ever seen an index finger that long? I mean, so, you got to give credit to these carvers. They're like hand cutting all this stuff into chiseling it into stone. It's a lot of work, and it's tough work, and they do a great job. But sometimes they're a little off. I mean, that finger's like creepy on the left. This one's a little bit too long, pointing at the heart. And then this one is just pointing to the Holy Bible. It's like, you better read your Bible or else, it's kind of like the fair warning. That's what you have to do. But yeah, especially the one on the left, a little bit scary. On the left, it's more pointing to heaven. These are always heavenward pointing, as you can see on the left. Those look a little bit more like a real hand, and notice the collar and everything. This guy, he must have lost a ton of weight before he died. Look at that sleeve does not fit him at all, compared to these other two, which look beautiful. This guy, yeah, must have been a skinny guy. Anyway, you have a fair number of these in Cumberland, in different cemeteries, so you'll find them as you're wandering around Cumberland. And now when the hand coming down is coming from the clouds, so it's God reaching down and either presenting the person's life on a scroll, or in this case, plucking a link from the family chain. So this is a family of 5, and God's hand is taking the one that's died. It's a really interesting look, but when you do see the hand down, because you'll find that most often they're pointing to heaven with words, gone home, meet me there, gone to heaven, all kinds of stuff. Pointing down, it doesn't mean they're going, down below. It's God's hand, and you'll see if you look closely the clouds. Another God's hand pulling a link from the chain, and then sometimes you just have the chain without the with a hand, not with a hand. This is an example of a missing link in this family chain for Cyrus Rogers. So now you know what that is. If you ever see one of these, you're going to go, I know what it is. I went to his class and learned it, right? You learning something new, everybody? Has anybody not learned something new yet? Challenge me a little bit? No, good, okay. My job is done. Have a good night and see you later. Okay, fraternal organizations are next category. There's a lot of these out there. There's probably 50 different fraternal organizations with their own emblems, but the most common three we're going to look at. The most common of all is the Freemasons, the Order of the Masons. Compass and a square, you'll see it all the time, and there's the G for geometry, the noblest of sciences. So compass and square, very commonly found. But again, many other brotherhood organizations arose. We're going to see a couple more. So the Oddfellows is the second more common one. There's 3 chain links together with FLT, friendship, love, truth. So when you see the 3 link chain links like that, you'll often find the FLT rated side as well. So friendship, love, truth. The Oddfellows had a women's auxiliary called the Rebeccas. They had their own emblem. You can see the hand with the heart. That's a symbol for charity because they were a charitable group. But they do have the 3 loops down the bottom for FLT. So way more often you're going to find the 3 links. Sometimes you're lucky enough to find one of the Rebecca's monuments. The Rebecca's monument here is at Laurel Hill in Saco. They had their own fenced lot, and they put up a stone for a young mill worker who died. He was from England. He had no family here, and they very nicely put a stone up for him when he died. Okay, so now the third one is Knights of Pythias. They also have this ornate emblem. The one on the left is in metal. The one on the right is in marble. On the metal one, you can see the shield has FCB, Friendship, Charity, Benevolence. So that one is one of the flat ones in a landscaped lawn cemetery, and it happens to be my great-grandfather, George Etter. Here he is. So he died in 1939. He was a member of the group, the Knights of Pythias. There he is in his splendor, and then on his ground level monument over at South Portland at Brooklawn, that's the symbol they put on his marker. Love my great-grandfather. Okay, number 14, hearts. As today, a symbol of love, the early belief was that the heart was the center of all human emotions. Sometimes you see the heart on the body. You can see it on the one on the left. That's a nice 1700s marker where they put a heart right on the torso. Here it's kind of hidden a little bit, but it's in the urn. So the heart is in the center of the fluting of the urn. Here on the left, you can see it's actually framing the inscription on a marker. That's a Bartlett Adams stone. And then here is a ledger slab or a tomb cover. This lies flat on the ground over the grave. It's of mudstone or sandstone. And they had an insert of slate that was inscribed, put into that one. You can see it's been cracked and repaired, but that one on the left, of course, is standing upright. This lies flat on the ground, is much bigger. But again, the heart shape is what we're looking at. Trees and flowers, the one on the left is from here in town. That's a willow tree, weeping willows, mourning of the dead. That's really the symbolism. Usually they are, as shown here, a beautiful big weeping willow tree. Sometimes they're shown snapped or a broken branch. That's signifying the life has been cut off. The life has been cut short. Quite dramatic here. It's just snapped right in half, as you can see. Flowers, again, that one's from just up the corner. Beautiful little simple bud. But usually what we see is a snapped bud. Like you see here on the right, you see down below. Once again, the symbolism there is a life cut short or life cut off. So it's the broken branch, it's the broken column, it's the snapped bud. It's all reminding us that somebody has left us too early. On the left, it's just a nice kind of a wreath-like arrangement of flowers, quite beautiful. On the right, we have another wreath. This one is for a husband and wife, and what you often find on a man's stone is oak leaves, and on a woman's stone, ivy leaves. The oak leaves for men, strength and maturity. For women, ivy is representation of loyalty and faith. And in this case, you can see it's a family marker. They're buried together. So the stonecutter weaved both the oak with the ivy together on one design. Quite nice, quite touching. A wheat sheaf, when you think about a wheat sheaf, that's the end of the harvest. So the harvest is over, and it's the end of a long period of time of growing. That's why you only find these on gravestones for old guys, usually. like me. It's the end of a long life, so you will rarely find a wheat sheaf on a children's grave. I don't think I've ever seen one. Usually for an older man, maybe a woman as well. But the symbolism there is it's the end of that cycle of that life. Urns and willows, very common throughout the 1800s. The urn is a funerary urn. The willow is the weeping willow tree for grief and mourning. So you have death and mourning shown together on one image. This is in slate. And I think that's actually my business card design right now. So pick up a business card on the way out. This was made in Portland by Alvin Washburn, who was a nephew of Bartlett Adams working in Portland in around 1815. And that was his signature urn. He did that kind of an urn with that sort of looks like a nameplate almost in the middle. This one is right in town, right up the corner. Another urn from the Adams shop, and just a nicely rendered urn. Why is that? Oh. When you see a willow tree paired with an urn, as you do in this one, this is another one local. You have one of these, at least one of these, maybe two up in the corner. Notice the broken branch on the big willow tree. So we saw earlier the whole tree snapped. More typically, these stones that came out of the Adams shop, hundreds upon hundreds of them, which pair the urn with the willow. If you look closely at the trunk of the tree, you're going to find that snap branch just in that same location. Here's another one that's you guys have in town. This one's in marble instead of slate, a little more eroded, but quite beautiful in its whiteness, as you can see. The urn here on the right, and then nice shape to the willow tree. Ships and anchors, often for sea captains, but symbolically the voyage to the afterlife. And think about how much work that was for a stonecutter to hand chisel that entire thing into that particular stone. But when we find them, it's a beautiful piece. Notice it says "safe at home," so that's the image there. Is this guy's in heaven safely. Anchor suggests the soul's safe anchorage in heaven. So sometimes just the anchor is shown. Note the frayed rope. Sometimes you have a frayed rope. Sometimes there is a chain that's open. And people suggest to me, I have yet to prove it, but people suggest to me that when you see a frayed rope or an open link, that it suggests the person was lost at sea. That may be true. I want to test that out someday and actually look up records and find some that have the frayed and some that don't, and see if that's true. For now, we'll leave it out there as a mystery. Sometimes we find the three virtues, faith, hope, and charity. The one on the left is actually a newspaper ad we saw earlier. Faith, notice she has the cross, leaning on the cross. Hope is the anchor, and it says hope right in it. And then charity is usually a woman who's got her hand on her breast, or sometimes with a child. But faith, hope, and charity are found throughout many of our mid-century cemeteries. Okay, we're getting close. Open gates and open drapes. The one on the left is the open gates. Up here we have just parting curtains. You can think about it and what it means, or I can tell you, passage from the known world to the unknown world. It's the passage from earth to heaven. It's just the inviting one in. It's like that stone of the guy on the river. It's like goes off into a distance, and that's where he's going. That's heaven at the end. And that's what these are doing, inviting people to the afterlife. One of the more interesting in this category I found in Indiana. Again, I was at a gravestone conference out there and touring around. And this is a 4-year-old girl who died of an illness. And the family had her depicted kind of standing at the entry, parting the curtains, going from this world to heaven. A very touching image. That is what she looked like. And it's so touching. Notice she's still holding on to that curtain a little bit, like she's not quite sure that she can do this, Beautiful stone. Obviously somebody sadly missed by the family. Birds are symbolizing the flight of the soul. A dove, especially, is a messenger of eternal peace. Often they're carrying these laurel leaves or twigs, and you can see in this case different forms. The one on the left has preserved well. You can actually see feathers in that. This one a little less so, and this one's fairly eroded away, but we still can tell that it's a dove. In Wyndham and on Chebeaga Island, there are actually 2 obelisks carved by Henry Hansen, who was a mid-1800s carver in our area. He did a lot of marble work, and he put these doves, they look like pigeons, on the top of them. And honestly, the first time I drove by the one in Wyndham, I drove by and I was like, oh, look, there's a bird up there. And I pulled over and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a bird. You know, really quite realistic. And then I found this one in Chebeague Island, signed by Henry Hansen, so I knew it was the same guy. I'm imagining a hawk thinking the same thing I did, coming down there with the talons open, hitting that piece of stone and walking away with some broken toes, because that's really quite realistic. Maybe birds have better eyesight than I do. But anyway, yeah, kind of a look. I have one more, one with a bird on it. That's a really well done one, isn't it? Yeah, beautiful. So I was in the Eastern Cemetery, and that seagull came in and posed for me, so I thought I would throw that in as a little yuck, yuck. Okay, lambs. Once again, children's grave markers, often in 3 dimensions. And this is a lamb is a symbol of the innocence of the child. So we have 2 here that are toppers on the stone, as you can see, left marble. Here we have it, once again, as part of cemetery fencing. So it's a symbol that carries through. The lamb down here is actually segueing to our next category of books. This little lamb is sitting on a very slim book of life. This is a 4 or 5-year-old girl who died. So the slim book of life is there. Look at this very thick book of life with the hand pointing to heaven for an elderly man. So you might see a book and not know what it is. You might think it's a Bible, and often they are, but sometimes there are these other meanings to them, such as indicating the age of the deceased, as we have here. Books in a pile can signify knowledge, scholarship, and wisdom. So for a scholarly person, I could not find that Elizabeth Ricker was such a person. She never married. She lived to a ripe old age of 74, 5 months and 18 days. Maybe she had a passion for reading. Maybe she was a librarian or something. I don't know for sure, but her pile of books, maybe she just was very knowledgeable in general. Hard to make the link, but sometimes we don't know exactly what it's for. So professions, on the right you have a newspaper ad for a blacksmith. On the left you have a gravestone honoring a blacksmith. So pretty clear. On the left we have a musician. There's a lyre that was carved onto that marble. On the right we have a railroad engineer. You can see the railroad car. So they went to great lengths to show his profession on his marker. Soldier in the American Revolution. In the Civil War, sorry. Yeah. And Catholic bishop. So that segues us to our penultimate category of religion. Obviously, lots of people quite religious and would reflect that on their grave markers, so there's a lot of them. If you want to go to a Catholic cemetery, especially, you'll see a lot of interesting symbolism. So Christ on the cross, hand holding a Bible with a favorite verse, open Bible again with a verse actually written out. That's a stone you guys have up in the corner with the drapes over it, which is nice. Here we have the crown and the cross. On the back it reads, "On earth she bore the cross, in heaven she wears the crown." So it explains that symbol for those who might not know what it is. Our last category, causes of death, one of the more interesting categories. Most of these are not Maine, but I wanted to just share them with you because they're really cool. This is a sad one. A 2-year-old boy instantly killed by a stalk of boards, and they decided that it would be a good idea to illustrate his moment of death with him with the boards laying across. This is a Massachusetts marker from the 1790s. This one hard to see, but if you look closely, there's a head, and if you look above the head, there's a bolt of lightning coming straight down. This man was killed by a strike of lightning, and there's clouds on either side of the strike of lightning as well. So on the left here, we have a man who drowned. The boat is obviously upside down. In the water, you can see the oar and the oar locks, and over on the left, 2 little hands trying to come up out of the water. So yeah, think of the dinner table conversation on that night. Yeah, let's honor our William Cox by putting this upside down boat and have his hands coming over. Okay, so here's a man who was stomped by an elephant. Now, why did the family feel it was more important to illustrate the killer instead of the man who was the victim is beyond me, except that it makes for a very interesting monument, 100 years later when we're looking at it. But John King was in fact stomped by an elephant who they decided to illustrate. Yeah, he was in the circus. And I think there's one more here, yeah. Kicked by his mule. Okay, so the story here is the woman, the wife of the man lying dead at her feet, apparently had continued to tell him, this animal is no good, you've got to get rid of it, you've got to get rid of it. He insisted it was a good animal, and then all of a sudden kicked him to death. But she doesn't look a whole lot upset about this, nor does the mule. He's got a smile on his face. So, they're fun to look at. If it was my family, I might not appreciate making fun of it all, but it's really interesting. It's art from 100 years ago that somebody spent a lot of time creating to reflect the moment of death for these people in these unusual situations, so really interesting. Okay, so Odd and Curious in Maine. This one is over in South Portland at Mount Pleasant. It's a dog, not a person, even though it's a person. Cemetery, trained dog spot. It's just really interesting. You walking around, my parents are over there, so I walk around looking for them once in a while, and then you come across this and it's like, what? The umbrella image is unknown in my tribe. Those of us who study grave markers haven't been able to really figure out what that is, but there's a fair number of those out of the Bartlett Adams shop. He's got at least 15 that have cataloged that he did. I think it's like a protection thing, but I can't figure it out. That almost looks like, on the lower left, a pile of like cannonballs or something. This is for an infant child, so I couldn't figure out what that's about. I've never seen anything like it, but that's in Maine. Just an interesting one. You'll come across these really unusual symbols all the time, actually, not all the time. Once in a while you will and get a picture of them. Okay, so that's the end of the show. If you don't support Cumberland Historical Society already, I sure hope you do. It's easy to do in a bunch of different ways. I'm on the board of Spirits Alive, which is a friend of Portland's Eastern Cemetery. There are little pamphlets up there if you want to grab one. We do walking tours of Eastern Cemetery every day at 4 o'clock from end of May to middle of October. So every single day you can come in town, take a walking tour with a guide. We do a great job showing you around. It's 1668, so it's a 350-year-old cemetery, some great old stuff there. If you want to learn more about symbolism and grave markers and cemeteries, locally, the Maine Old Cemetery Association, nationally, Association of Gravestone Studies. I served on their board for a number of years. So those are places you can get more information. 2 more slides, and then we'll open it up. Next month, coming up soon, doing Saturday walks. I have 6 walks at 4 sites, and over 3 different dates. Scarborough, Black Point Cemetery, May 10th at noon. That one already is sold out. That always goes pretty fast, and that one is actually sold out, but it's on there anyway. There's a wait list. Dunstan Cemetery, the same day at 2 p.m. There's still a few spots open for that. That's a really cool one. There's some good old Bartlett stones in that one and some great stories. Laurel Hill is a garden cemetery in Saco. Gorgeous. You may know it for its daffodils in the spring. 1 million daffodils bloom. It's absolutely gorgeous. Some great mid-century marble stones in there. It's a great walk. So there's room on both the noon and 2 p.m. tour on the 17th. And then Greenwood is another garden cemetery. You saw the picture of the round lot at the beginning. There's still room on both. Only 2 spots at 2 p.m. That one's almost full. I have 20 people in each one. That's already got 18 sold, so a little bit of room, but I'd welcome you to come join me on any of those. If you can't remember any of this, just grab my card. It has my email, and I can send you the information about how to get in. Finally, if you don't want to wait, if you want to learn more right now, guess what? My books are here. So I know some of you have some of my books because I've been here a lot, but just so that you know, the book that's most about tonight is the Billboards of Maine book on the left, because all 3 monuments from Cumberland are highlighted in that book, and we talk about the families and what they're all about. Early Gravestones in southern Maine is the Bartlett Adams story. So that tells about stone cutting, and it has imagery of his artwork and things that he did. Eastern Cemetery, I was just here a few months ago. We talked about Eastern Cemetery, so you may know of that. Then Curious Gravestone, that's the volume 2. So all those are here. Happy to autograph them if you like. But why don't we see if there are questions before you all rush up here and get books. Yeah.
What do we know about paupers' graves and cemeteries here in Maine?
We know that I just spent a long time researching the paupers' graves in Scarborough and wrote a paper about it and did a presentation about it. So it's a point of interest to me. In that particular example, there was a town farm. So people who were paupers, homeless at the time, they could be housed at the farm, or they were expected to work and contribute to the farm. They only had 6 to 8 people there at any given time, and that farm operated from around 1860 to the early 1900s. And what they did, because these people had no money and they were wards of the town, when they died, they buried them in the backyard in paupers' graves. No markers. So in many cases, there was a little fenced-off area, unmarked graves. The town of Scarborough later decided that they were going to sell the town farm and redevelop the land, so they had the bodies, the remains, moved to Dunstan Cemetery. So I did research on all that and put that story together because people didn't know about it. So that's one example where the remains were removed from the paupers' graves and put into a town cemetery. There's no monument there. I'm trying to get them to put up a monument to honor these people because I know who they are. I know their names and stuff. But paupers' graves, we have a paupers section in Eastern Cemetery in Portland. They were segregated from the rest of the community, just as the African Americans were, just as the Quakers were, just as the criminals were. The white Protestant majority took the land, and everybody that was different was on the outside, including paupers. And the sad thing about paupers' graves is because there was no money, no markers. So the records aren't good, and we lose a lot of them. So they're all over the place, theoretically, and what towns decided to do with them over time, it's anybody's guess. But I'm happy to know and happy to tell you that in Scarborough, at least, they did what I think is the right thing, and they actually disinterred them from the property, moved them to a mass grave, I think, in Dunstan. So, kind of did the right thing. But yeah, they're all over, and usually unmarked. Yep. Yes.
I'm supposed to bring a microphone for people to
Sure, I
talk
need
into?
that, but you mentioned that the Garden Cemetery in Bangor was the second oldest.
Yep, Mount Hope, yep.
What's the oldest?
Mount Auburn Cemetery
Oh,
in
in
Cambridge,
Cambridge.
Massachusetts, yeah.
That was my guess.
Yeah, that one
Yeah.
was around 1832 or 3, and Mount Hope comes up like 4 years later, yeah. Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
Hold on just a moment,
Oh.
please. This way the people on the TV can hear also.
How do you know who carved a given gravestone? Like you say, oh, that's a Bartlett Adams or that's a Henry
Yeah,
somebody or other.
so you have to be a person who's got a lot of time on their hands to study grave markers, like I've done for years. The best way to know for sure who carved a stone is when it's signed by the carver. And the signatures are typically on the earlier markers underground. On the marble stones, they're above ground. But only maybe 5% of all the stones that we have in Maine are signed, so that's not ideal. And the earlier ones, they tended to not sign them. It's more the mid-century when they were all, competition was great among the marble workers. There was 60, 70 marble workers working here in the 1860s, so they signed to differentiate themselves from everybody else. So there's different ways to do it, but one of them is to find out who was in a particular area, cutting stones at the time, look for the patterns in that local cemetery of that work, identify the lettering, and then learn that lettering and then apply it to the next stone you see and figure that out. Poll tax records help, advertisements in newspapers to tell you who was working when, family histories, there's all kinds of ways to sort of put together who it is. There's a lot of guesswork that starts, but once you nail it and you see something and you've got it down, then it's easier to then apply that to the next set and the next set. So for example, for Bartlett Adams in Portland, because I'm the world's expert on Bartlett Adams, I'll just say it, I am. There's nobody that knows more about him or his work than I do, because that's what I've studied for years. There were a few signed markers of his in Massachusetts. He came to Portland. He's the only game in town. He's got no competition. He's not going to waste his time pumping out markers and signing them because he's not in competition. But he's the only guy here, and so there's all of these stones from the early 1800s at Eastern Cemetery that mirror the ones that he signed in Massachusetts. So I learned the lettering, I learned the designs, I say that's totally him, I know that's him, and then I build it from there. What I did in Eastern Cemetery in Portland was I then looked at census, poll tax, other records that I could find of who else worked for him in his shop between 1800 when he arrived in 1828. Put together a list of who I think it is, and then I start looking for what stones were made in that period, and some very obvious patterns developed, including the Alvin Washburn urn that I showed you that's on my card. His brother, Elias Washburn, was a very sloppy cutter, so he's got a sloppy urn with all kinds of mistakes all the time, and he only cut between 1817 and 1820. So I find a sloppy urn that looks just like him with the sloppy lettering, and I'm like, Elias, thank you. You know, I know it's him. So I've gone through that. I've literally studied tens of thousands of markers over the years to learn and understand who did what. And I have a catalog of that. And I get to the point where now I can walk in, like I can go up to the corner and I can walk through the old slates and I'll say, Bartlett, Elias, Alvin, Alpheus. I know who they are by now because I know their artwork. You know, it's artwork and I get to know their artwork. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get started, but once you get into it and you really understand it, then it becomes easier. You recognize characters and, you know, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yep. Anything else? Go ahead.
Excellent. I think of or I associate the urn with cremation, which is so
Right.
common these days, and yet I noticed that for hundreds of years before cremation was so prevalent, the urn was a prominent symbol on a gravestone.
Yeah.
So what did an urn mean?
It was a funerary urn because, in fact, cremation was a very popular form of the disposal of remains in ancient times. And it wasn't until later that they started to say, oh, here's a better idea, put the body in the ground as it is. So there have been cycles of this through time. So it is, in fact, a classical cremation symbolism, a cremation urn, that has been modernized over the time, modernized in the 1800s to what we see here. So yeah, it was a symbol that was around because they did cremation many, many years ago. Yeah, in Egypt and wherever. Yeah, yeah, Rome and other places. Yeah. Yep.
Hold on just a moment. This isn't Maine, but we've been to St. Gaudens in Vermont. The man who's the sculptor.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my favorite one is the one of Clover Adams. Have you ever?
I might have seen it, but yeah, I don't know.
I'll show it to you.
There's a ton of marble in that, right? Beautiful marble monuments in that. That's the place. Yeah, I think I've been there.
And it's at that Mount Auburn Cemetery.
Oh, at Mount Auburn. Oh, okay. I thought you said Vermont.
Well, the sculptor's from Vermont.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, so
And he did coins and a lot of other
okay,
things.
but you're talking about a monument at Mount Auburn. Yeah, I've been there many times. So yeah, yeah. There's a Sphinx in there and all kinds of stuff. Speaking of early stuff, the obelisk, the Sphinx, all that comes from Egypt, and there was a resurgence of that in the 1800s, and a lot of monuments took on those forms. Yeah. In the back.
Curtis, want to go?
Sorry.
These cemeteries and time takes everything are dissolving.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if organizations like our Historical Society are taking digital images of these things so we stand some chance of archiving these things so that another 200 years out, we stand a better chance of seeing it.
Yeah, there are really few organizations that are doing focused work, as you suggest. The Spiritual Eye Group and for Eastern Cemetery, we're doing that. We do transcription and photography of each stone, and we, fix them and all that. There are different groups that pop up and do it. One of the good things that's happened is the rise of the crowdsourced website Find a Grave, where people just go in and take a picture and post it, because that's a current picture of that stone at that moment, and things do deteriorate over time with lichen growth and trees falling on them and vandalism and other stuff. So there are billions of photographs out there thanks to all these people doing this crowdsourced stuff. But at the same time, many of them are not doing accurate things about reporting who the person is or where it is and whatever. So it's a mixed bag, but it's better to have a huge number of photographs of stones than to not have any of them. So yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it, but my group, we have we do a transcription, a hand-drawn transcription. We take photographs of them. We document everything about it. We do before and after photographs as we're working on them to clean them or reset or repair them, so that we have a running tally of what they look like. But the reality is, especially the marble stones, they are going to erode away. There's no way to save them. They're going away. So yes, get a picture, get a transcription so you know what it says, that kind of stuff, and get it somewhere, because when they're gone and eroded, then people walk by and they just see a marble stone you can't read, you don't know who it is for, or any of that stuff. So yeah, it's, it's a thankless task in a way, but yeah. Question?
My father and my grandfather both have errors on the Find a Grave. How do you contact Find a Grave to get that?
Yeah, so each listing on Find a Grave was put up by an individual as an owner of it. And they are responsible for updating it. So what you do is you go on that page, you're going to see below the picture of the stone, there's a bunch of information, but there's one that says Suggest Edit. Click Suggest Edit, and you can go in and write whatever the edit is. And then submit it, and then you get a message that says your suggestion has been submitted to the owner, the lister, and then they have, here's the cool thing about Find a Grave. A lot of people just put pictures out there and then walk away and never deal with it again. So they don't pay attention, they don't care about it, they just get the pictures done. But there are other people who are way into it and they'll take care of it. So when you make an edit request, it goes in, they get an email saying somebody suggested that it should say Mr., not Mrs., or whatever that kind of thing, or whatever it is. And they can either accept it right away or they can deny it, but they rarely will deny it. But if they don't act on it, within 21 days, Find a Grave automatically gives you that edit. So it'll happen, but it might take 3 weeks to happen if the person doesn't pay attention. Yeah, so you can do it. Just if you can't do it, just shoot me an email and I'll help you do it. See, I do it all day long. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hold on. Okay, so the best thing for us, when we want to go get our gravestones, is to get granite, is that correct?
I wouldn't say the best thing.
Okay.
I'd say, what do you like?
Well, okay.
What do you like? I mean, what do you like?
Something that's going to last forever.
Okay, so if you want something that's going to last forever, granite is your best bet.
Okay, and is there like a place that has like really unique granite?
You can get black, gray, white, pink. There's different colors of granite, and they'll cut them in different shapes. You saw some examples with a round ball and over. So all you need to do is go visit a stone shop near a cemetery
Right,
that's
and
monument shops. Go in and take a look around. They're going to have examples of the different stone materials they have. But yeah, the granite's going to last better than any of the older stuff. There are stone cutters out there today that will cut a slate or a marble for you. But you just have to know they're not going to last forever like the granites do, yeah. We good? Thank you all once again. Great to see you all, yes. So if you want to learn more, come up. I'll sign books for you.
Got his books, we still got goodies in the back there.
Appreciate that. Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Gorgeous.
Clover Adams.
Okay, Clover Adams, yeah.
And when you see it in person, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
breathtaking, yeah.
I mean, you sit there.